One man's lie almost cost him everything: his wife, his integrity, and his very future. This is the story of Abram's greatest test. The Lord had spoken clearly to Abram: "Leave everything familiar behind and go to a land that would one day be his." A promise that would shape the future of nations. But little did Abram know, his journey would soon be fraught with danger, deception, and a terrible moral compromise. At 75, Abram left his home in Haran, along with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all that they had gathered over the years. They set out for Canaan, a land of unknowns, but also the land promised by God. But there was one thing Abram had not prepared for: the inevitable trials of this uncertain journey. Arriving in Canaan, Abram was faced with the overwhelming sight of a land filled with people who would not welcome him. The Canaanites lived there, fierce and untouchable. Yet it was here, in this very land, that God appeared to Abram and made a divine promise. The Lord said in a gentle but firm voice, "To your offspring, I will give this land." This was a promise so profound, so grand, that it would echo across generations. But Abram's journey was far from over. Little did he know, his faith would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. The land of promise was not immune to hardship. A famine swept through, and suddenly, the future seemed uncertain. Abram, in desperation, made a fateful decision to go down to Egypt, hoping for refuge in a foreign land. But Egypt held dangers of its own, dangers Abram did not foresee. As they neared Egypt, Abram, fearing for his life, made a chilling choice. Instead of trusting God, he asked Sarai to lie, to say that she was not his wife, but his sister. The consequences of this deception would soon spiral out of control. Sarai, known for her beauty, was taken into Pharaoh's palace. Abram's heart must have raced as he watched his wife, the woman he loved, be pulled from his side. The lie had worked for a moment. Abram was treated well, gaining riches and livestock, but at what cost? What began as a small lie, a desperate attempt to save his own skin, quickly spiraled into something far darker. The Lord, in his anger, sent plagues upon Pharaoh's household, a divine warning, a punishment for the deceit that threatened to unravel Abram's entire life. Pharaoh, furious and confused, summoned Abram. The moment of truth arrived. Pharaoh's words cut through the silence. The Pharaoh demanded, "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Now take her and leave. Leave this place and take all that you have." In that moment, Abram stood before Pharaoh, stripped of the power and respect he had once been granted. His lie, his cowardice, had been exposed. The truth had come to light, and with it, a crushing sense of shame. Abram was sent away from Egypt, his wealth intact, but his integrity shattered. He had lost more than just his wife for a time. He had lost the trust that had been placed in him by the God who had called him. But the journey was far from over. Abram would go on to face even greater trials, but this moment would serve as a reminder that faith, once tested, would have to be renewed. The God who had promised him the land would not abandon him, even in his darkest hour. In the end, the truth would prevail, and Abram would rise again, stronger in his faith, learning that trust in God's plan was far greater than the temporary safety of a lie. Thus, the greatest test of faith is not what we do, but what we fail to trust. Abraham had everything he ever wanted, but had to lose someone he loved to keep all of it. Abram had risen from humble beginnings to unimaginable wealth. His flocks were vast, his tents grand, his life a testament to the promises of God. But with great riches came great complications. His journey was about to take a drastic turn, and a choice loomed ahead that would change everything. After escaping Egypt and seeking refuge in the Negev, Abram's wealth was undeniable. But as the days passed, the land could not sustain both him and his nephew Lot. Their herders bickered, fighting over precious resources. Tensions were mounting, and the land that had once seemed abundant began to feel small. The peace between Abram and Lot had been shattered. The land that had blessed them now divided them, and the bond of family was strained by the weight of wealth. Abram, ever the wise patriarch, knew the only solution was to part ways. The question now was, where would they go? Abram, in his generosity and wisdom, gave Lot the first choice. "You take what you want," he said, "and I will take what remains." It was a choice that seemed generous, but little did Lot know it would seal his fate. Lot, his eyes scanning the land, was drawn to the rich, green plains of the Jordan River, a land lush and well-watered, like the garden of the Lord, and even like Egypt itself. It seemed like paradise, so full of promise. But behind that beauty, there lurked a grave danger. Lot did not see it. He chose the land for himself, heading east toward the cities of the plain, where sin was already beginning to fester. Lot had chosen the best land, but also the most dangerous, near Sodom, where the people were wicked and sin ran rampant. Little did he know, his choice would lead him to horrors beyond his imagination. But for Abram, the parting was not just about loss. It was about gaining something far greater. The moment Lot walked away, God's voice called to Abram. God spoke in a gentle but reassuring voice. "Look, Abram, to the north, the south, the east, and the west. All this land I will give to you and your descendants forever. Your offspring will be as countless as the dust of the earth." God's promise was unshakable, and Abram's faith remained firm. Though the land was vast and beautiful, Abram knew it was the Lord who would guide him to possess it. With renewed strength, Abram journeyed to the great trees of Mamre in Hebron. There, he set up camp, and in the stillness of the land, he built an altar to the Lord. And as he knelt in worship, he knew that though Lot was gone, the promise of God's provision and protection would never leave him. It was a moment of quiet triumph. Abram had made a sacrifice, yes, but it was a sacrifice that would lead him into a future brighter than he could have ever imagined. For in the end, the land was his. And so was the promise. We must let go to move forward. Abram's journey was one of faith, sacrifice, and divine guidance. And the land promised to him would one day belong to his descendants forever. The air was thick with fear and desperation. The valley of Siddim, the stage of a deadly war, was the last place anyone wanted to be. For mighty kings from distant lands had united, bringing destruction and chaos upon the cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, and the neighboring kingdoms. They crushed their enemies with ruthless power. It was a battle for survival, and no one could escape. For 12 long years, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah had been subjects of Chedorlaomer, forced to bow to his might. But in the 13th year, they had finally rebelled. Little did they know, this act of defiance would cost them everything. As the battle raged on, the four kings swept through the land, conquering all in their path with no mercy. The king of Sodom and his allies mustered their forces for one final stand, but the odds were too great. Their forces were crushed under the weight of an overwhelming enemy. The ground was littered with the fallen, and in the chaos, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were forced to flee. Some men stumbled into the tar pits, helpless, while the rest sought refuge in the hills. It seemed that nothing could stop the relentless invaders. But amid the destruction, the unthinkable happened. Abram's nephew, Lot, was captured. Along with all his wealth and belongings, Lot was taken by the victorious kings. For Abram, it was personal. The stakes were now higher than ever. News of Lot's capture reached Abram in the quiet of his camp near the trees of Mamre. His heart burned with anger and determination. He knew he couldn't let his family member fall into the hands of those who had no mercy. Now, what would you do if your family was taken by force and the odds were stacked against you? Abram didn't just sit back. He took on 4 kings. Without hesitation, Abram gathered his 318 trained men, born in his household, and set off into the night. They journeyed through the rugged terrain, pushing their bodies to the limit. The darkness hid their every move, but Abram's resolve was stronger than ever. They tracked the kings through the wilderness, following their trail to the north. And then, Abram divided his men. The attack came swiftly, a surprise in the dark of night. The 4 kings never saw it coming. In a battle that would shake the very foundations of the land, Abram and his men defeated the mighty kings and their armies. They pursued them all the way to Hobah, near Damascus. And there, Abram claimed victory, recovering everything: the goods, the women, the children, and of course his beloved nephew Lot. As Abram returned victorious, his heart was filled with both relief and pride. But little did he know, his next encounter would be even more surprising. In the valley of Shave, the king of Sodom approached Abram, offering him riches for the return of the people and goods. The king's proposal was tempting, but Abram had no intention of becoming indebted to this corrupt king. "I have sworn an oath to the Lord," Abram declared. "I will take nothing from you, not even a thread or a sandal strap. I will not allow you to say, 'I made Abram rich.' No, my wealth comes from God alone." Instead, Abram humbly accepted only what his men had eaten and the share for his allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. His faith and integrity were unshakable, even in the face of temptation. Abram's actions were not only a testament to his strength and bravery, but also a demonstration of his unwavering trust in God. He had faced overwhelming odds, rescued his family, and emerged victorious, all while maintaining his honor. The greatest battles are not fought with swords and shields, but with faith and resolve. Abram's courage in the face of impossible odds was a testament to his trust in God's promises. One night, Abram was filled with doubt and fear. He had been called by God, led to a strange land, and given a promise that seemed impossible. But the one thing Abram wanted most, a child, an heir, had not come. The word of the Lord came to him in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." The words were comforting, but Abram was far from at peace. How could God bless him if he had no child to carry on his name? Abram's heart was heavy. "What can you give me, Lord, when I remain childless? The one who will inherit my wealth and land is not my own flesh and blood, but my servant Eliezer," he said. A lifetime of promises, but no family to inherit them. Then God spoke again. "This man will not be your heir. Your own son will be your heir." The words hung in the air like a dream that seemed too far to reach. God led Abram outside into the night and said, "Look up at the sky. Can you count the stars? So shall your offspring be." Up with Seba? Yes. But Abram had no choice but to trust. Could this truly happen? Was this promise just a fleeting hope, or the beginning of something incredible? Abram, despite his doubts, believed. And in that moment, God credited it to him as righteousness. It was a monumental shift in Abram's faith, one that would carry him through the challenges ahead. But even with this promise, Abram still had questions. "How will I know, Lord, that I will gain possession of this land?" The answer was as mysterious as it was terrifying. "Bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, a dove, and a pigeon," God instructed. What was God asking of him now? Abram did as instructed, bringing the animals and cutting them in two. The sight was gruesome, half carcasses lying across from each other. But something even more unsettling was about to unfold. As the sun began to set, darkness descended. Abram was suddenly overcome by a thick, dreadful sleep. A horror gripped him as a voice spoke of the future, a future of pain and suffering. "For 400 years, your descendants will be strangers in a land not their own. They will be enslaved, mistreated, but I will punish the nation they serve, and they will emerge victorious." The weight of this prophecy was suffocating. And then, as if from nowhere, a smoking firepot and a blazing torch appeared in the night, passing through the pieces of the sacrificed animals. It was a divine presence, a sign that would change everything. In that moment, God made a covenant with Abram, an unbreakable promise. "To your descendants, I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. This land will be theirs." And just like that, a man with no child was given a promise that would change the course of history forever. Abram's faith, his trust, had opened the door to something unimaginable. The land, the descendants, the future, all of it was now part of God's plan. The journey of faith is paved with doubt, fear, and uncertainty. But sometimes, just sometimes, when we least expect it, God's promises come alive in the most powerful ways. Abram's story was far from over. The covenant had been made, Now the future awaited. Click here to watch the story of a slave, a mistress, and a divine encounter.